nervous now.
Doesn't look like
If
pajamas.
this takes much longer, I'm not gonna be able to breathe. This
Okay, let's go.
is 3 sizes too small.
Let's go. That's on recording now. Do you want me to start over?
No.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd. I'm Heather Burnt-Santee. And you probably already heard Lisa Murphy is here.
Hello.
And Bethany Corrie.
Hi.
Dan Hodgins.
Hi there.
And Richard Cohen.
Hello.
And we're having a pajama party for this episode. This is the 200th episode of That Early Childhood Nerd.
Woohoo!
And that's nuts to me. Nuts to me.
It's the 200th episode?
Yeah.
What's it about?
It's going to be about themes.
What?
Yeah. So
Well, I've got a theme for us.
okay.
The theme for this episode is it's the 200th episode of That Early Childhood Nerd. Woo!
Yay!
I'll drink to that.
What have you done? So the Wednesday listeners will have to wait till the weekend to see the visuals.
Oh, that's right. They can't see that.
You're so nice. Bethany, did you not get your email?
I was having technical difficulties.
There's
we
always
need to
one.
get Dan a color printer.
Yeah. Hey, look at that. It's not green.
So let's take a moment before we get into and or destroy the topic of themes.
Ready for destruction
Yes. Okay. Well, hold that thought.
of the
Ms. Heather.
themes.
Since this is your 200th episode, why don't we each go around and say like a favorite memory from That Early Childhood Nerd, or of Heather, or something that would embarrass her, or a note of congratulations, whatever you'd each like to say. Who would like to begin?
You should.
Oh, okay. Happy 200th episode, Heather. My favorite memory of, I'm so glad to be part of this family.
I'm glad
My
you
favorite
are.
memory of That Early Childhood Nerd was the Alfie Cohn episode, of course, that Alfie Cohn himself actually replied to in a PG-13 tweet or text or something to Heather.
It was a DM. He slid into
Oh,
my
he
DMs.
slid into your DMs. Ooh. And that was all because of this whole gross romantic triangle between he and Heather and Lisa that I just had to take a shower afterwards. It was so gross. So that was my favorite That Early Childhood Nerd memory.
I think when I first met Heather was when we were all out in Florida. I think it was Florida. And we realized that we totally fangirled over certain nerdy other people. And so it's not a roast or anything, but it was probably the first relationship that I ever started that bonded over like quoting research, in all honesty. That I can't say has happened with tons of people in my life.
I love it.
I feel very put on the spot, and I have no favorite memories of Heather or the podcast.
Also cool.
And just so the audience understands, she is not at all on the spot. She received this message yesterday.
She was given ample time to prepare. Ample time.
Ample.
And if she really loved me.
I don't do well under pressure, and I don't think I love you.
Oh, okay.
Wow. Okay, whatever.
That's fair. You're fired.
I do love you secretly.
Mhm.
It's not secret.
It's not secret.
It's not.
No, everybody knows.
We saw that tattoo you got, like "I love nerd" on with the glasses on the inside of your arm.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know Heather that well. I think we met in Florida also.
Uh-huh.
I remember we were on the pontoon and people went swimming to the. Remember that, Lisa?
I do, but do you remember
Heather.
how she got her first nickname? Her first nickname was Non-Pon
That's true.
because she refused to go on the pontoon.
Because of sun and heat.
Right.
Right?
And also introversion.
Right. She just wasn't sure yet that she was ready to jump in full board with the.
Right.
Which I don't have anymore.
But what I've discovered about Heather in my short life with her so far is the great deal of respect that she has for opinions, without making a lot of judgments, at least in public, regarding certain topics. The last time Lisa and I and Heather presented, Heather said she was afraid to ask, which shook me to pieces. I couldn't believe she said that, but afraid to ask me to do a podcast.
I was intimidated.
Now that she asked me frequently, I'm thinking, does she have no respect for me?
You're just one of the regular people again now, Dan.
And I've done a lot of podcasts, and I really like this one the best. It's thorough, it's concise, and it, like Richard said, it's a pleasure to be part of this group.
Yay.
And to that, I will add, because I agree with all of this, I did a Zoom workshop a couple nights ago, and one of the attendees was like, oh my God, I had to turn my camera on and see if it was you. I recognized your voice from that Nerds podcast. And I was like, I have my own podcast, and no, but
I'm Lisa fucking Murphy, right?
Well, what I love most about Heather, unlike Dan, is that she's incredibly judgmental. She's just wise enough to do it behind your back after the podcast is over.
Not behind your back, Dan. Not behind your back.
But and to that though, Richard, though, I will add that although it might not necessarily be opinions that she wants to maybe share, they're still accurate, if that makes sense. One, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like they're maybe just like, I'm not ready to have that out there, but I know it's still correct.
Or maybe it's that we just happen to agree 100% with her.
Maybe we're just as judgy then. Maybe that's why this happens.
I think that's probably more likely. I can't say that I've ever been called non-judgmental before, but that is something I've been working on myself over the last few years, is at least not being so
blatantly
shitty and blatant about it.
Not only am I not respected, I'm a liar now.
Dan, I will remind you that in that same conversation when we recorded last, I said I had wanted you to have you on the show for a while, but was scared to ask you. And then I also said, I still can't believe you come on the show.
Yeah.
So
sweet.
There's the respect. Every time I'm like, really, Dan's gonna talk to me again.
Clearly, I didn't mess it up as bad as I thought.
Grown by the 200th episode.
What, Richard?
I look forward to seeing how you will have grown by the 300th episode.
Oh boy. Do you know how long it takes to get 100 episodes? A long time. 300 will be far away if I make it.
Now I'm feeling a little jealous that nobody had a happy 600th epised
You got to do it for yourself, Lisa.
Apparently it does.
You got to start the party yourself.
I want somebody to wave a sign for us. Right?
Well, let's hold up your signs and let's sing Happy 200th episode. Happy 200th episode to you.
Happy
200th episode to you.
Happy 200th episode, dear that nerd. Happy 200th episode to you. Jazz hands.
And many more.
I'm going to judge our singing. It was horrible.
That was beautiful. That was the best.
Keep our day jobs, Dan. We'll keep our day jobs.
And I like musicals.
Dan, you need to work on being judgmental behind my back.
Yes. You guys are the best.
All right, so that was my theme because I'm very pro themes.
We do all have jammies on. Some would call that a theme.
It is. Yes, I did think about that. But we decided not to go with the drinking, so we're only a half a theme.
Whoops, I didn't get that part.
Dan didn't get that. His black and white printer cut that.
Richard, you're the one who said we shouldn't drink because we have another recording later, and now you're drinking straight from a bottle.
Screw it.
God, Jesus. Hey, let's talk about early childhood stuff. Okay, so we have been trying to set this up. You guys have me all choked up for a long time recording together about this theme topic because it's really hard to get 5 of us scheduled together when we have time to do it.
not actually really hard
So,
because two of us don't have lives.
so it's really hard to do this with Lisa and Dan. But we're all here and this is going to be great. And actually, it's good that it got delayed, or it would not have been the 200th episode topic. And I think that was Richard's idea. I'll say that. I was trying to do a much more difficult 200th episode. And Richard bullied me into this instead. Okay, so quote comes from a blog post. The blog is called Mrs. Jones Creation Station. And she seems to be a seller of curriculum ideas and things. So anyway, she has a post about the importance of thematic units, and she says in her "Why Use a Thematic Unit" section, thematic units can result in a lot of craftivities, colorful centers, thoughtful conversation, and fun read-alouds. There are so many reasons why using integrated thematic units can benefit your learners. It helps students engage with the content being taught, allows students to apply content throughout curricula. Learners are able to make connections. It draws from past experiences and prior knowledge, and it develops vocabulary and comprehension skills.
So does
Aw,
play.
bless her heart.
Yeah, so does play, right? That was like checking that bullet list off. Play. Yeah. So that's where we can start.
To that, let me jump in with there. Like those last, maybe not the first couple that you said of like her stated benefits, but those last few, connecting to prior conflicts, applying, attaching past experience, vocabulary, that happens organically. Without an adult deciding that there is a certain thing that we're supposed to be talking about.
Yeah. To be fair, she cites some research because she says that's important to do. And the research that she cites is from 2016 from a woman named Susan Newman, who is a language and literacy acquisition expert. And she says that the themes give a more intensive, intentional opportunities for children to integrate their vocabulary and content knowledge. And so I just want to say the content knowledge, in case anyone looks this up and said, you bashed it, but here's the research. Susan Newman, I'm familiar with because of my work in the speech language hearing department at Purdue. And she is speaking specifically to developing language here and using themes for vocabulary, and the content she's talking about is not like math, science, those content areas. The content that this research is talking about is a specific language piece of language learning, and it's like I don't have the examples because I printed them and then I didn't get them off the printer, but but it's more about how you use language than learning content across a curriculum. So the research that she's using isn't really fitting the case she's trying to make. So that I just had to get that out. But now let's go. Themes. Richard loves them. Why do you love them, Richard?
I was lying. I hate themes. I have hated themes since before Bethany was born. Or I'm guessing anyway. No,
Bethany
I would
was
say
not
that,
born. She emerged from the sea foam.
This is true.
Wow.
Yeah.
I would say that what you just read and what this author said is theoretically correct. There is nothing incorrect in what she said, but it's like Maya Angelou says, when you know better, you do better. And so, yes, children might achieve some of those goals that was on her list, but it's 2020. And we now know, even though themes are still so predominant in our field, and I'd love to talk about why we think that is.
Yes.
Because a lot of your listeners will be like, wait, what? I love themes. I've taught themes for years. What are they going on about? But so they're not bad. It's just that
it could be better.
What we've had since I was a young teacher in the 80s is the rise of neurology. We know how brains work in ways we never knew before. And we know there are much better, more effective ways of reaching those same goals than those teacher-directed themes. So that's
And I agree. I agree. I barfed out, of course, some, thoughts so I would sound eloquent to some degree, or not scattered and all over the place, because I think there's multiple entry points of conversation to this, totally dependent on where you are in your own journey, right? And I also feel very strongly that depending on who the audience is listening or at a workshop, depending on where they are on that hierarchy of decision making, unfortunately, you can have people who are frontline providers in the classroom who think that themes are stupid, but aren't in any position to change the mindset of the program that they're in. And so I at least want to acknowledge that we realize that some people might be 100% in agreement, but they're just not the people who can do anything about it. I mean, we can keep talking about it, but I mean, until the owners and the directors and the people who are buying this mass-produced shit that comes in the mail, until they decide to do better because we know better, there is an element of, preaching to the choir or even spinning our wheels. I also think that the theme has been hijacked, not theme, excuse me, the word has been hijacked. Like if we call it a project, then somehow it's more acceptable. I mean, because at the end of the day, if I am observing play episodes all day long and I start to see stuff emerge, depending on what I know about those children, I might choose to take some kind of a direct, I don't know, a way to add to it or whatever. But I, like you, Richard, long ago broke up with that. Here's the list of 52 themes that the director gave to me, and come hell or high water, it's the third week of December, so you have to be talking about X, Y, Z, whatever. Like, no. But I also know, and I realize I'm kind of monopolizing here, as a former owner of a program, I also know that I created a place where I wanted to be able to say, go play with go teach with a play-based mindset. And that was like throwing teachers into the deep end, because they're like, So we almost had to cherry pick like the most developmentally inappropriately appropriate as possible things for them to kind of guide themselves until they got comfortable with what we really wanted them to do. And I think, you got to acknowledge that middle, like getting ready to make that next leap, but I need something. Otherwise, I'm going to be completely 100% ineffective in the classroom.
That's the fear.
Yeah, because if that's all you've known is that it's the third week in July and I'm supposed to be doing rainforest in Indiana. Or right now, I mean, I'm in Florida. I realize this is going to air later, but it's December in Florida right now. And if I see one more person gluing cotton balls onto cut out snowmen, I'm going to vomit. But it's winter.
And in Florida, we have lots of snow.
We have tons.
So,
it's just falling out of the sky.
It's relevant
on paper in Florida.
Yeah.
Here's my big, I agree with there's a lot of aspects of themes that we could forge into. One of the things that's most difficult for me is, we know from brain research, and it doesn't matter who you look up, we all seem to agree that learning is integrated, not isolated. Would we all agree with that?
Yes.
Even if we took just that concept alone, that would suggest that themes is a contradiction to integration rather than isolation. And I think or isolation versus integration. So I think part of it is the aspect of using, and to be honest, 36 years ago, I used themes.
Me too.
I was hooked by the companies that sold these marketing strategies that I thought made teaching easier.
Remember the Themosaurus books?
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
With that,
I'll tell you later, Bethany.
Remember the 500 theme book?
Oh,
yeah. Then they increased it to 1,000. I thought, oh, this is great. I now have 2 years. That kind of thing. So it does make it easy, or they make it sound easier.
And like we're teaching. And it
Correct.
makes it look
Right.
like I'm teaching.
Right. And that's the other component that I think we talked about this in some other sessions, is the fact that sometimes people use themes depending on their stage of development because they view their aspect of, I'm not sure how to teach
Yeah.
unless I use a theme. Rather than observing children and paying attention to what they need, etc. Because even at college and universities, I've taught at both, we really don't do a good job of helping people observe children. Do
Right.
a better job of telling students what to do, but not really how to observe children and base the curriculum on what they've observed.
So I have an on like right now thought in my head that's coming back to the use of the word teaching.
Yes.
So if we continue to stay aligned with thinking that our job is teaching, which I don't care what year it is, still in too many environments looks like the mug jug, the old
Yes.
theory,
Yes.
right? Open your head so I can dump in all the jug of knowledge that I've got because I'm bigger than you and older than you. Because I would add to Dan, what you just said is that not only does it need to be integrated, but it needs to be something the kid is interested in
Absolutely.
the first place.
Yes. Yeah. Because I don't wake up in the morning thinking I only want to think about bears today. I just don't do that. I don't know if anybody else does,
Oh,
but I
do,
don't.
but that's a whole other podcast.
Right, Richard, you can keep that off, Mike.
Right.
Hey, I wanna let Bethany talk for a minute.
Oh, I
What do you
guess.
think about themes,
Well,
Bethany?
She doesn't like to be put on the spot. She's not
Oh,
prepared.
well then.
I'm totally prepared for this, just
okay.
not about Heather. Because I thought the theme was themes. And so I was prepared for that.
Sure.
I woke up this morning thinking about themes.
Bears.
Well, I think that like there's for young teachers maybe, or inexperienced teach, I don't know, for people, some people.
Teachers in the survival stage.
Right.
teacher
It's like
development.
it's not just that we feel like we're doing something, and I'm not saying we like me,
Right.
but it's that like I feel like our culture is of doing. So like I
Yes.
have to be busy. I have to be prepping the activity, and I have to be cutting out the circles, and I have to be, getting the worksheets ready. And if I'm just sitting with my notebook and like watching the kids play, then I'm not doing anything and I'm wasting that time. And so when we have themes, it's like, okay, I've got to get through all of these things. We've got our checklist of like crap to do. And then like we feel busy during the day. So like obviously we must have done something if I've felt frantic all day long trying to
Yes.
sing the bear song and read the bear book. And
I
talk
found
about
it's
bears all
effective
day.
to give people baby steps of how to break up with themes. Like I think by saying don't do themes anymore is very much pulling the rug out from under people.
Sure.
So
Yes.
I think through the years I've gotten better at saying, well, let's take a step and modify it this way. Let's. And so before you know it, they start to see, I'm not frantic anymore because wow, that one thing that I started as a theme on Monday, like nobody was really into it. And so I just said, okay. And then we spent the next 3 days, quote, just playing.
Yeah.
And my stress level was down. There were fewer behavior problems in the classroom. But then I re-up on the next week, right? And oh my gosh, that theme was so exciting to everybody. 2 weeks later, we're still doing it. And I think when those organic opportunities are allowed to happen, like to have a beginning and a middle and an end, the person is more inclined to start shedding some of that their own selves instead of thinking it's something somebody's requiring of them.
And I think that Dan hit the nail on the head when he said, to kind of piggyback on what you're saying, Lisa, that the way to get where how Lisa suggests, or the journey that Lisa suggests you take, how to get there is by improving your observational skills. And if you notice when the children are engaged, when their affect is heightened, and you're able to notice that, then, and you're reflective, then you'll start to realize, they don't all care about bears or dinosaurs or pirates. I wonder if that has something to do with it, and I wonder if there's an alternative to it. When I was a young teacher back in the early 80s, and I was thrown in and I was getting my BA at the same time, so I didn't have the formal knowledge. And my director said, no, this is how it works. You teach in themes, and the first week is all about me, and then it expands to my family, and
community
then
helpers.
community helpers in my neighborhood. And I thought, oh, well, that sounds logical.
Mhm.
Yeah. And you do a letter of a week. So that way you can make sure you've been through all 26 letters by the end of your time together, and you make sure you've covered every shape. And I remember thinking, oh, yeah, that sounds like it makes good sense. So I didn't know. I think there's a lot, we have such horrific turnover in
Yeah.
our field, and we constantly have this influx of new, sometimes often young people who hear that and don't know any better and think, oh yeah, that makes sense, sure, I'll do that. 'Cause
And Richard, because they have their own memory jog, because now some of the kids that you and I had in the 80s are now coming into the field, and they are essentially like, now we're telling them to question what they themselves received, right? And we all have had various conversations as to how difficult it can be to give back something other than what you got.
Mhm. Right. And in a recent podcast with Heather, a couple of them with Carol Garboden Murray, we talked about that one of the push and pulls is that early childhood professionals want to be part of the K through 12 system and be paid those same wages, which they certainly deserve. But those K to 12 teachers have a very structured curriculum on which you learn this in kindergarten, and being able to learn what's in first grade is dependent on what you learned in kindergarten, and so on up through 12th grade. And so a lot of the people in our field who want to be part of that stream, or when I was a director and parents would say, well, I don't understand my child, I've read what they need to do in kindergarten. So aren't there concepts that you should be covering in preschool so that they can be ready for kindergarten and then first grade and on? And there's a seeming logic to that. And being a great early childhood professional is often very counterintuitive and counterlogical.
Because we know that learning isn't linear, especially in early childhood, but really ever. And but then we try to teach it as if it was linear. And it's about familiarity and comfort level, I think. And experience, which you all just talked a lot about. I'm just trying to think of some other defenses of theme planning that I've come across. And one was, if we don't have the same activities, and if the children don't all do the same activities, how do we know that they're all learning, or they're all getting what they need? And that was a difficult one for me, because my immediate answer was, well, that's not how they learn. So, but also, even if they are all sitting and participating in the same theme craft or book, or they're all sitting there, doesn't mean that they're getting the learning that we think they're getting. And it just is sort of
evidence of their compliance, not necessarily that anything's
not engagement or learning or
if we rotate them through stations so that we can make sure that every child has
gets every experience.
Then I can sleep easy that night.
But
I think a lot of it is rooted in, and we've also talked about this in other podcasts, it's rooted in the need to control, which is based in the belief that young children aren't inherently capable and competent learners. And therefore I have to teach at them and control their experience.
Bethany, did you have something?
I did.
You did like this thing.
I raised my hand. I think also, like, with the teacher keeping busy with themes, they're removed from what the children are doing. So if you've got a class of like 12 to 18 kids, and you're trying to make sure you're doing all your teacher things so you can teach, then you're not seeing that Amber is learning differently. Even if you're covering the same material, she's learning different things than Jason is, because like, they're picking up on the different things. And so you have to have the relationship. Otherwise it won't matter if you're doing themes or not, because you're not going to know what's going on in your
Yeah.
classroom.
Yeah, that's true. Good point. Um,
I'm-
so, who started talking?
It was me.
Oh, go.
I'm wondering, I've been thinking a lot lately about how someone gets stuck in the mud. And I'm with themes, it's easy for someone to get stuck in the muds because
Mhm.
everything we talked about, essentially. What I'm concerned about is not only the theme, but how someone gets stuck. And
Uh-huh.
how do we move them forward into the process of getting out of the mud, essentially? And that becomes a difficult process because themes are so attractive. Let's face it, there are some things that people have done, and I'm not defending things, but there are some activities that people have done with themes that aren't necessarily inappropriate. They might not be the best thing for children, but like Richard said, it really amounts to how much control I have of an experience or an activity. So one of the ways maybe to have people move forward is to look at how to become less needing control.
Mm.
Rather than getting, like, and Lisa mentioned this earlier, rather than saying no themes at all, because people aren't going to pay attention to that. But how do we move people forward into looking at other possibilities? I'm going to say something that's going to be shake some bones.
Oh, good.
Not that, but I believe that there are some loose parts concepts and some project-based concepts that are theme orientated.
Yes.
100%.
And yet
Absolutely.
we just change the name.
That's what I'm
Yep.
saying.
Right? We changed the name, but not the game. And I think
Exactly.
I think, Dan,
exactly.
it was you that was maybe not when we were recording, but after we'd stopped and we were just chatting. You had just gotten the new issue of Young Children,
Yes.
and it was about not themes, but content teaching or something. And the article you read was presenting something as if it was emerging or project based, but it was really just a theme. Like they had
Right.
noticed one interest that a child had, and instead of looking at how the child engaged in that interest and what the child needed next, or if he needed anything from them,
Right. It was
they went
preserving water.
conserving water. Yeah, they like to play in the water table or something. So they started
Exactly.
a conservation project.
So sometimes the evolution is to fall back into the mud
Yeah.
because the support might not be there. We mentioned this earlier, depending on, because they might not have control of the decision of what can be done.
Mm-hmm.
But the other aspect is I think the field changes so frequently that the support mechanism for looking at it is a holistic approach rather than an isolated approach.
Yeah.
Isn't necessarily there. And I'm not defending themes, but I think the issue is beyond themes.
100%.
It's how to get people. Yes, it's the person, right? It's how to move them forward.
Yeah.
I wanna share something, and I'll try and abbreviate it because it can get long and wordy. So way back in the day, when I owned a childcare center, I used to think, okay, this is crazy. I have a solution. I can't do it because it's going to be unethical, but this is how I think we could get people out of the mud. You hire people to work in that 52 weeks, letter of the day, number of the day, color of the day, and you have them occasionally for staff development go and tour the other places that you own that
Right.
are 100% play-based and child-centered driven. And you let them, it's all business as usual. Letter of the day, got to turn in your lesson plans, and we got it. And I'm going to make sure you're staying on schedule. And then after about 6, 7, 8, 9 months, you come barging into my office saying, what the hell is this fucking bullshit? How the hell am I supposed to know what children are going to need? Making me lesson plan. Do you know how the benefits, if kids play, blah, 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 and you secretly clap under your desk.
Right.
And now you tell them they can go work at the school, but this is like the minors. It's like you gotta grow them up through the field team and the minors until you're ready for the majors, right? Until you're ready to go to the show.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that is the most unethical, but yet it would work. It would work.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've had to do some compromising around themes. I mean, I worked twice for a national chain of centers that had a prepackaged curriculum that came down, and I kept the theme, but tried to, you know, make sure the play opportunities, I could explain it in terms of connecting to the theme. And that usually worked. It worked better when I was older and more established than it did when I was 24.
I think though, Heather, that's an honest part of our evolution. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't speak for everybody, but I think I can speak generally for most of us, is
Yeah.
that you were like, oh, I don't have to make the theme fit every single interest area.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, I
Yeah.
can read a couple books and do a stupid art project and nobody's going to fire me or
Yeah.
like you start to learn to dance
Yeah.
within it
Yeah.
until you are ready to move yourself into perhaps
Yeah.
an environment that is more 100% aligned with what you're
Yeah.
believing.
The preschool that I work in now, before me, had the same teacher for like 30 years, and she, you know, had a good program. It ran very smoothly, and people loved to be in her class. She was very theme oriented. When I came in, a whole wall of the storage room was just theme boxes, which was not unfamiliar. You know, we all have seen that or had those. I definitely have had my theme folders. But our compromise then, because I went then to totally no themes, nothing, and it was difficult for some of the other folks in the program to make that switch. And so we compromised on having a focus book, and we just read the same book a few times. And then some of the things in the environment could tie in, like we read Creepy Pair of Underwear. So I threw some underwear in the water table and let them wash underwear. And we read a book about an umbrella. So I just threw umbrellas everywhere and let them integrate. And we could do all those vocabulary enriching kinds of things that are tied to theme, but it was still very much children's choice and play.
You turned into a frog there.
Right. Someone else talk, because my microphone's weird.
Frog week.
I love
But
frogs.
I think that's an important piece of that, right? Is it's like you're shedding little bits that you no longer need and finding, you know, because ideally we would get to interview our co-teacher before we accepted the position, you know, and we would make sure that there was a little bit of overlap of that goodness of fit. But the reality is that you're often tossed in,
Right.
and you got to do that dance and figure out where. I've lately used like a Venn diagram visual of like, we're not on the same page, but what sliver of being on the same page do we have? Because as we all would agree, the relationship piece is going to be more effective than, you know, arguing over a theme is
Yes.
not. Where can we start working on relationships so that we can balance this out? But I agree 100% that it comes down to the control piece and to the feeling like I'm teaching piece. We've been doing school to children, and we start as soon as, in some places, 6-8 weeks old, and then we wonder why they don't want to get on the bus when it's time to go to kindergarten, because we've exhausted them, we have burnt them out. And you know, not to reduce this to a soundbite, but I mean, we've all heard that if you want it in their head, it has to be in their hands. And you know,
And their
recently
hearts.
I've heard, but it's not going to be in their hands if it isn't in their heart, and that whole piece needs to be taken into consideration.
Well, for me, that takes me back to what Bethany said in the beginning, which was we're this culture of doing. It's the world, or at least in the United States, it's the world we found ourselves in. But, you know, I hate to keep bringing up this book, but it's such a revelation for me, Carol Garbett and Murray's Illuminating Care. Reminds
Which I hope
me
is out by the time this episode comes out.
That's right. It reminds me that the gift of the early childhood professional is a focus on being and not doing. And that means swimming against the tide of our society that really wants us to do, and wants young children to do. And as really the gift we are to them is in focusing on how we're being and how they're being, and how we're all being together.
I think the other question is whether or not themes it's ethical.
Yes, please go on.
Because if we're looking at, and that's the topic of ethics right now is real popular because, you know, we shift in cultures and
Yes.
ethics. And if we really believe that children are individuals and need to be respected as individuals, that would be the ethical. approach is to look at them as in themes frequently are in contradiction again to that component, because in many times the argument at workshops is, well, even though I do a theme, Dan doesn't have to follow it. Well, what are my choices if the only thing is out is bears or dinosaurs or whatever?
Yeah.
Then the choices really doesn't provide me an opportunity to. And the other component is, and Lisa brought this up earlier, if we're a play-based driven, child-driven program, how does things support child-directed, child-initiated, and child-controlled? It really has to be initiated, in most cases, by the adult. And so ethically, it's not really appropriate if it's not child-led, child-directed, or child-initiated.
And that goes back to, have we lost faith and lost trust in what we know is what children need? Because, and I'll repeat myself, the closer we get to having that kind of an environment, the less it ever crosses your mind
Right.
that you have to be reverting back to some kind of overly rigid, overly controlling kind of day or curriculum or schedule or planning.
Yes.
You don't need to.
Right. Right.
Well, and so for me, my ethics need to be rooted in developmental theory and research. That's what I have to reflect on to make sure that I'm making ethical decisions, right? So, I'm a big old Erickson fan. So when I think about the young child's need for autonomy or power, and then I apply that to whatever I'm providing for young children, I have to ask myself, who's got the power here? And is it the child? And if it is the child, then I feel like ethically I'm on the right track. But so many themes, again, shift the power away from the child. And like Dan says, even if you make it optional, if they don't have other choices, then they remain powerless.
Yes.
Ooh, that goes back to something I love unpacking, which is, are we really proponents and protectors of play or of choice? Because when there is choice, out of that comes, I think, what we would identify as play, but choice is at the heart of that.
Yeah. Well, I want to jump back to ethics for a minute because, the main idea of most professions' ethics is do no harm, right?
Correct.
And if we are creating an environment where control is so important, so we've got this theme and we want to stick to the theme and we've put all this work into it, so the kids better do it. And this is how I prove that I'm a teacher, and this is how I know that they're learning. Then that sets some children up for failure and stigma and ostracism because they won't do what you want them to do because they're not ready, or they're, it's not what they need, or it's inappropriate. And so we have done, and this is a blanket statement, and maybe it's harsh, but we have done harm in that then, because we have created a system that has, really almost intentionally separated the good kids from the non-compliant kids. So even taking away the cognitive aspects of theme planning, there's that social and emotional piece that's always part of what we're doing. And that makes me so uncomfortable to think about that and to see it being perpetuated. Even well, Dan doesn't have to do it if he doesn't want it. Right. That's a message to the other children.
I was just going to say, the other kids know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It also doesn't take into account socioeconomic and racial justice, or gender justice.
Yeah.
Whose themes are they, Richard? Sorry for interrupting, but whose themes are they? Where did they come from? Whose lens have they been created and curated with?
Yeah. And if you do practice your observational skills, you start to notice and collect data that shows that a certain group, a certain subset seems to be doing well with your theme. and you start to notice who's not, and then you have to question what is that about, and why is that so? And in a to me, what's related to that, as we come back to, I was thinking about the getting them out of the mud topic that Dan was bringing up earlier. So many of the people in our profession are, you've all heard me say so many times, are some of the loveliest human beings I've ever known. And it makes me so grateful to be in this field, to be around such amazing human beings. But most of them, certainly most of my students at the community college level, come from very poor public education settings themselves, in which critical thinking has not been valued.
Yeah.
Right. And so get them out of the mud and do what I've heard Dan and Lisa suggest. You have to have the ability to think critically and not just follow instructions. And most of the people that flow through our field were never given that when they were young. So I just want to put that out there too.
Yeah, they're often compliant rule followers who don't want to rock the boat, loving as the day is long, caring as the day is long. But when we've had that conversation in other podcasts and in other topics, who the temperament of who our profession can attract makes us amazing caregivers, but horrible advocates, horrible for standing up for ourselves. And, we sometimes there's parts of us, we're like, oh my God, this is the stupidest thing I'm ever asked to do. And we'll bitch on the way home and we'll talk to our families about it, but we never actually take any action.
Well, I need
because how dare you call me out like that?
To put food on my family's table.
Yeah.
And I can't risk that.
That's a piece of it too. At the end of the day, if you have somebody who even asks themselves, am I doing harm? Is a unit on fairy tales really at the end of the day that bad of a thing? And I think like what Dan says, it's not necessarily that it's a bad thing, but the methodology in which we often that we adopt in order to reach that goal, I think is often what needs more scrutiny. Like not themes, not standards, not wearing a mask, but how are we now changing and modifying the environment to get to that place of compliance is often where I get antsy.
And that I think ties back to what Bethany said about relationships early in the conversation, because you can have, a playful classroom, you can have a theme classroom. If the adults aren't intentional about relationship creating and supporting and growing and warm and unconditional positive regard for the children, then it doesn't matter how you're presenting content or
what sign is on the door.
What sign is on the door. And so I feel like part of what makes me uncomfortable about themes then is, again, what Bethany described as the busyness of the teacher preparing everything for the theme and not being attuned to what's going on around her while they're doing that.
Well, themes are definitely related to being a teacher. And until these folks understand the difference between teaching and facilitating.
Amen.
Yeah, right. That's part of getting out of the mud, is understanding. I don't, like I had a young teacher contact me the other day and said, I just don't understand. We just finished our unit on the planets, and all of my preschoolers can recite the names of all the planets, but I can't get them to sit through calendar. What should I do?
Calendar. Oh my word.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there.
That's a whole other episode.
Unpack there.
Writing it down, calendar episode.
Yes. I'm thinking that what Bethany said earlier is we live in a culture where themes are predominant, because if you're the last college I taught at, there was a sociologist. Remember, this is a sociologist who said to me, I have not changed my syllabus in 20 years.
Right.
And as we develop, if we're going to trainings and that sometimes the content of a syllabus is based on themes. First we do this, then we do this, then we do that. Not taking a look at what students need, even at the college level. But what the textbook says, we are supposed to do. So Bethany's right, we do live in a culture that is really, really, again, focused on the doing aspect rather than the evolution of growth and understanding and developing critical thinking.
Yeah.
So it's not just at the preschool level. It's, I'm thinking it's really a movement that is throughout
Education.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, this for me goes back to facilitation versus teaching. I've taught the same college courses now for years, but they're different every time because I facilitate these discussions and I take that leap of faith because I have no idea what's going to come out of my students' mouths. And I facilitate it. And so what happens in a particular class, my students may come away at the end of the semester with some different things than last semester students, because that random group of human beings had different things to offer and the discussions went in different directions. But a lot of my community college colleagues, that idea makes them very uncomfortable. They think
it's the control piece.
Yes.
It is impossible to make the leap from teacher to facilitator until you have made peace and reconciled your need for control, and you've either started to figure it out or you realize that it was getting in the way. You got to do that homework, that piece of it.
Yeah,
you're not going to be able to get to it.
It's part of this myth we have of standardization. Like we think that we can really achieve standardization and everyone on the same level, and that's not how humanity works. But I think about like the position statement for developmentally appropriate practice. One of the things it says, one of the core considerations is that we have to know the individuals. And then they have all these other pieces throughout it that say, learning's not linear and we need to support whatever. But then we see them still talking about standards and meeting standards and teaching to standards. And you can't be both. You can't be individualized and standardized. And I think that's part of what Themes tries to do is feed into that myth of standardization.
Yeah. Well, it's a conundrum. And again, my community college piece is maybe as a metaphor for early childhood education. But so when I was teaching at St. Louis Community College, I happened to be teaching on the Ferguson campus when Michael Brown got shot, and before, during, and after. And I had a very unique group of Ferguson residents who were my students, and they were incredible. But we were going through this process of becoming one college. And there were 4 campuses across St. Louis. 2 of them are high poverty and high demographics of women of color. And the other 2 campuses were affluent and white, and they were mainly young girls who were fresh out of high school and wanted to get some of their credits handled at the community college level before they went on to college. And the concept was that when you got an associate's degree from St. Louis Community College, no matter what campus, it told the employer that you all had gone through the same education. But the truth of the matter was there was no way it could be the same. There was no way that the people who I was charged with serving could meet the same standard expectations that the kids on the affluent campus could get to. So it was a myth that paper could mean the same thing.
Yeah.
But it's what we do. We want to get young children ready for kindergarten. So as long as they all know their address and they all know their letters and can spell their name, then they're ready.
Are they though?
No, not at all.
Another episode.
Write it down.
Write it down. So we're at an hour now, kids.
Happy birthday.
Too.
Wait.
I want to go back to what Lisa said just for a second.
Sure.
Is to move from teacher to facilitator, and Richard said this also. The avenue of recognizing who you are, why you're there, and the word choice to me, again, is absolutely crucial, because I think looking at who makes the choices, and you can't make a choice unless you give up making choices unless you feel confident about yourself.
Sure.
And I think part of that is the ability of idea that if I give up control, I lose control. And
Ooh,
I
that's
think
good.
there's a culture, again, that supports themes because it gives me control still. So we have to help people move. I think we got to stop saying that themes are bad, even though I don't like them. But how to help people move from themes to look at other components, and how to give up control.
And that requires that self-reflection piece.
Absolutely.
That, and I was wondering if I was going to be able to say this, to stop defining ourselves by our ability to align our practice with a theme, that we're
Yes.
more than our bulletin board, we're more
Right.
than the door decoration, and that by questioning a programmatical, like a school-wide programmatical decision, to start breaking up with this rigid alignment with a theme-based ideology doesn't mean you're bad.
Correct.
I'm not, but we all know that, like, but I do butterfly unit
Yeah.
every spring. I hatch turtles every winter. That
Right.
I'm not taking you away, but I think we have to be honest and be willing to go there.
Yes.
That by moving back past your butterfly hatching unit, you still, let's look at what you do
Yeah.
bring still to the table.
And
Yes.
you can still hatch butterflies. Like you can still do that if that's what you really want to do, but it doesn't have to be tied to a theme where everything is butterfly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we've done this every year.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
I'm not wanting to take away, I'm not wanting to take your whoopee away from you. You know, I'm not pulling your binky out of your mouth.
Right.
I do though want you to start seeing that you bring more than that,
Yeah.
than the chicken hatching.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
But that's a really good point, though. You know, we are creatures of habit and routine. We
Yeah.
human beings, and there's comfort and security in
those
in
rituals.
August. I don't know all the kids coming my way, but I know how the year's going to go because I have everything planned out.
Yeah.
And that's part of being human.
Yeah.
Sure it is.
It doesn't make you the best professional,
Mhm.
but it does make you a human.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So here's another offshoot podcast topic: playing teacher. All right, I got the list. Bethany, do you need to say anything? We keep talking over you.
Oh, hold on. Say it again.
Do you
need to say anything? We keep talking over you.
Oh, no.
Okay. Thanks for letting us see your visitor.
You come hi?
So Bethany, for those who are listening and not watching, runs a family childcare home, and one of her little ones just wandered in and got on her lap. So we're all distracted by.
And they love putting the
Absolute
earbuds in.
cuteness.
Yes, the cuteness.
We
Okay.
asked her. If only we could ask her what she needs, we wouldn't need to have this conversation.
How
Yeah.
do you feel about themes?
There you have it. We can end on that expert evaluation of themes.
There you go.
Okay, we really should wrap it up, but is there anything any of you were just dying to say that we haven't got into yet? This could go on and on and on. Oh yeah, thank you
Happy
very
episode.
much
Happy anniversary
for
birthday.
celebrating with me. Yay. I like you all. Okay, well, thanks everybody for listening. And this is another episode. Like I always invite comments on the episodes, but I don't really usually, like, I don't think anyone ever really comments on my Facebook posts, but of the episodes. But anyway, this is one I really would like to hear people's thoughts about, to sort of understand it better myself, and also think about how we can support people as they try to do this journey and get out of the mud. So thank you very much for listening. Thanks to everybody
Nice
for
seeing
being
all you
here, and the pajama party,
Whoop,
and all the
whoop.
fun we've
Yeah,
had.
if you all want to see Dan Hodgins in his Star Wars pajamas, you have to watch the video version.
And we know everyone does want to
Yeah.
see that. So all right, this is real, wrapping it up for real this time. Bye everybody.
May The force be with
Bye.
you.
Bye.